I want to start with the simple truth that's been on my mind lately, that we can name truth without having to qualify it. We are dynamic and life moves in seasons, in layers, and in quiet shifts that don't always announce themselves. I'm in an era like many of you where we may be noticing a sharper shift. So today, this is about how we can honor the continuum of who we've been and who we are becoming through lived wisdom. Welcome to the first episode of Woman Wiser. I'm your host, Sikin, and this is The Quiet Reckoning. Turning 40 felt like a switch flipped. I didn't have a big celebration. My partner and I had just moved to a new city and country. We had no furniture. I couldn't even get a credit card. That's how I started my new decade. While most people were upsizing families and homes, I was paying rent and starting over. Now, to some, that might sound uncomfortable, unsettling, traditionally unconventional. But that's the thing about betting on yourself without a roadmap. It leads you somewhere unexpected. I've always been someone who embraces that. Because here's the thing. Age doesn't hand you a roadmap. You build the roadmap. Change can be disorienting, even when we opt in by choice. For a long time, I had a familiar space to call my own, and I knew at least what was coming the next day or who I was going to see that weekend. But suddenly I was eating takeout on the floor of an empty apartment, more like what you would expect from yourself at 25 instead of 40. I had a couple of friends in my new city, but no real plans other than my workday. It was a bit of a void, to be honest, with the two massive life shifts happening in tandem. And at the start, I often felt a hollowness around where my identity had previously lived. It felt like I had to devour everything to prove to myself that I was still really here, breathing, existing somewhere other than my laptop. So yes, 40 was revealing because I was memorializing it so differently than I expected. I was shaking things up, and yet I was living the same unscripted version of myself. This time learning about how I adapted in a much bigger space of unknown than I was used to previously. As I metabolized that, the image of myself in this new space started to feel refreshing. I found myself asking, where do these expectations I'm assuming even come from? Why do they feel so real if they are not even my own lived experience? So what was your transition to 40 like? Was it what you expected? In those early moments, the number 40 couldn't completely fade into the background for me. I still had so much I wanted to do, things I'd started and left unfinished, and I really started to rummage around to locate the severed pieces of myself and get the suture kit out, start sewing the pieces back together. But even with the desire to do that, there was this innate pause. The energy to act wasn't coming naturally to me, and something really needed to be liberated inside me before I moved forward. Then the narrative crept in. You've peaked. Your glory days are behind you. You're too far gone from getting them back. What did that even mean? I knew I didn't want to go backwards. I sensed something ahead, but I couldn't see it clearly. On the surface, it felt like failure, like a setback. Yet the ease of releasing myself from the production and performance of it all, from proving myself, felt far more palatable. I had become apathetic to a point to the things that had historically brought me to life. So maybe it's okay to feel disconnected from yourself for a time. We shift and shed in life, and stepping into 40 was not meant to be a return. It was a reckoning. I believe that life happens in seasons, and I asked myself, at 40, when I feel like I should be doing more, pushing harder, is that still my story? Or is it more about the continuum and the integrative point where everything comes together? Past, present, and future. So enter my season of waiting and ease. Not waiting for something to happen, but allowing myself to live, dream, and create without pressure. I began learning the language of my new self, digging into belief systems and patterns I'd carried from the very early days of my life. The wounds and the scars I thought I'd overcome, there was always more. Someone wise once told me that tension and anxiety are our body's way of protecting itself. They're messages, sometimes gifts if we let them. They're also invitations to look inside and ask, what version of myself am I protecting? Is it who I am today or someone I used to be? What parts of that version give me strength? And where am I ready to soften around the spaces that become walls? The more I stayed on that path, the further I felt from anxious pursuit, the closer I felt to trusting and giving voice to the deepest parts of me. What had changed was my capacity to be discerning about how I released myself from the power of those stories. Stories of suffering, guilt, discomfort from the people and the moments that made me shrink myself, erase me, silence me, and the shame of letting them. There was power in naming those pieces for myself and in illuminated boundaries I had placed instinctively and in some cases even reactively. I started to question whether they were a buffer, a placeholder, or whether I was really using them to thrive. If boundaries is something that feels like a theme for you right now, or maybe it's adapting your output to the energy you want to give, think through the why. Really take time to claim or reclaim those choices. By having agency over how and why I chose those boundaries, I naturally started to soften around the guilt I didn't even realize I was feeling for putting them there in the first place. In the instance where we do have a choice, why do we always feel guilty for saying, you get this much of me because that's all I have to give? Those of us getting to know ourselves deeply in this era, we're leaving behind what no longer feels honest. We're not starting over. We're continuing with more truth and fewer apologies. We've stayed in roles that didn't fit, smiled through conversations, put off our own clarity because someone else needed comfort. We come from cultures and systems that rewarded silence and self-sacrifice. So now more than ever, we care about our truth. We speak openly about our bodies, emotional labor, the toll of sacrifice, how the world makes us feel. We're shedding guilt, performance, and the pressure to be good. We're not just a growing demographic, we're evolving with force. We were raised in an analog world and adapted to digital. We were taught to survive, not center ourselves, to bear suffering, not to be whole. And now we're rewriting that script. We're redefining midlife on our own terms. We're redefining womanhood on our own terms. And we're just getting started. Thank you for listening to Woman Wiser. Follow along for bi-weekly episode drops. And remember, real power isn't loud, it's lived.